Hello and welcome to the Blank Podcast, the podcast where we delve into those difficult moments with some well-known guests. I'm Giles Perry Phillips, and I'm here with my friend and comrade on this journey, Jim Daly.
Hello, comrade.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. So it's a bit communist, isn't it, the comrade thing?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
This is a bonus podcast.
It is a bonus podcast.
Yeah, we've snuck this one under the radar.
Yeah, because we were going to have last week's was going to do the last one, but we're going to do, and we're giving you an extra little Christmas bonus.
We're feeling Christmassy.
Yeah.
We're feeling really generous.
And it was such a good podcast.
It was so good. We couldn't wait to get it out. Yeah,
So
exactly.
excited to put it out,
Yeah.
so,
So obviously we said Happy Christmas to each other last week. Should we say it again?
We should, I
Merry
think.
Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Yeah.
How you doing? Slash whatever you celebrate.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Like whatever, because some people don't
Yeah.
celebrate Christmas,
No,
obviously.
of course,
so
yeah.
if you're doing family
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
or whatever, or even if you're just working as normal,
Yeah.
just, have a good time.
Yeah. Have a break, though, if you are working.
Yeah, give
Hopefully
yourself
get
a break. Yeah. Well, listen to this pod.
Yeah,
Probably
exactly,
a good way
yeah.
of doing it. Because this is an epic pod.
It was an epic.
This
Definitely,
is-
an epic. Of,
this pod goes
the content
places.
in this was,
Interesting.
yeah, it's fantastic.
But
And,
I think with our guest, Rufus Hound, I think it was always going to be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Rufus has got so many ideas about the world, so it's just really great to sit down with him. And what a privilege we had. You and I travelled up to Stratford-upon-Avon,
Yeah.
and we got to record in the RSC.
We did. Well, we
which is
stood on stage
We actually stood on stage. You did some
at the
acting
Royal
with Rufus.
Shakespeare Theatre.
Yeah.
We did
Yeah.
a scene, me and Rufus.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously,
What-
you were the only person who witnessed it, but it was
I was
probably one of the best
yeah,
scenes
I
ever
was-
performed at the
What-
RSC.
What Shakespeare play were you doing it from, though? I couldn't quite gauge that from the
It
dialogue.
was sort of our interpretation of Macbeth. It was
Macbeth,
Macbeth.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Who were you?
I was the lead, the
What,
main
Macbeth?
one, Steve.
Or Macbeth's wife?
Just Macbeth.
Yeah, Lady
Well,
Macbeth.
I was Steve Macbeth. We were doing like a.
Oh, it's
we were
okay.
doing
Steve
like
Macbeth. Oh, yeah.
a modern
It's like Hamish
interpretation.
Macbeth, like the detective show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, just like that. Anyway, thank you, Rufus. He let us go on stage. It was
fantastic.
amazing.
And we should say that Rufus is doing Boy in the Dress, the David
Yeah.
Williams adaptation by Gus Chambers.
with
and
music by
Robbie Williams.
Robbie Williams.
Yeah, so
And
which is amazing.
Guy Chambers.
Guy Chambers, yeah, which I just said.
Yeah, you did. Sorry. I was so desperate to get to Robbie Williams, I'd forgotten you said the other half.
I was building up. So he's doing a long run there.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds really exciting, and obviously it was great to actually go on the stage and see all the scenery and stuff. It was brilliant.
amazing. It looks really good.
Yeah, fantastic.
But
and
also-
actually a very atmospheric place to be. I mean, I've never been there myself, but
Yeah.
I know lots of school trips go there and stuff.
Yeah.
And
we found a quiet little, well, as it turns out, not a
well,
very
it was
quiet
called
room. It was called the
quiet
Quiet Room.
but actually there was quite a few interruptions.
Yeah. Which you'll hear during this
There was,
pod.
there was a storm at one point, so the rain was lashing
Yeah,
down.
people
on the
rehearsing next door.
Yeah, there was children singing. Yeah. There was various members of staff in and out. Jim had to move his car at one point. You won't know that, but he did. It was a real, but it was a great podcast, and I think we should just dive straight in.
Agreed. Yeah.
Wicked. This is very nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
And nice mood lighting, I think, in here as well.
That's what we
You've got a
need.
kind of chaise thing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're only 2 thoughts away from the full Cleopatra.
That's how I live my life, to be honest.
We've got
I think you should go full Cleopatra.
No, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to do a disservice.
Full Cleopatra is then you have to hold a snake to your breast.
Yes.
Been there a few times. A few Friday nights.
2019.
No, I'm feeling very comfortable. Well, Rufus Hound, thank you for coming on the podcast and for hosting us here at the RSC. This is the pinnacle.
I only really like to do podcasting in arts institutions.
Yeah.
So it was either
Well,
here
so
or I had
do
to
we.
clear the Tate, and this was quick.
Slightly less admin. It's lovely to be here. This is probably the pinnacle of our podcasting career, I would say. For this.
What, being at the RSC?
We've
I think
made it.
Yeah, I think we have made it.
We've officially made it.
Yeah.
Because they do quite often do podcasts when they become massively successful, like a live one from the Royal Albert Hall or something like that.
Yeah.
We haven't quite reached that level.
We haven't been
yet.
invited to that yet.
I was going to say, RSC, you're
I mean, obviously, it's not a live audience here.
No, it's just 3 of us, let's be honest, in a loft.
Yeah.
But a very nice loft.
But you've got to start somewhere. and
Just
I think
move that skateboard and the Christmas decorations. Let's crack on.
How are you?
Very well. Can't think that that's going to be a problem, can you?
It's fine.
It's ambience. Ambience. Who says ambience?
Ambience.
It's ambience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I should explain. We're in a place called the Quiet Room in the RSC.
We just turned out to have not big as quite as
Not as quiet as we imagined. What's
fine,
the opposite of nominative determinism? Yeah.
It's all good. I think a bit background music's all right, I think.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Well, the keener-eared amongst you may be able to get an exclusive peek of many of the songs from the RSC's hit show, The Boy in the Dress.
Which you're currently obviously involved in.
Yes.
How's it going?
Well, very well. I mean, I'm not really... I wasn't booked through the marketing department of the RSC, so it feels weird to go into the marketing blurb.
Yeah.
But 10 years ago, David Walliams wrote the smash book, Boy in the Dress, and then Mark Ravenhill, who's better known as sort of, more enfant terrible and, or a spikier playwright, read this children's book and thought, there was one particular line in it where Dennis puts on the dress for the first time, and David Walliams wrote the line, and for a moment it felt like they were in their own private musical. And Mark Ravenhill just read that and went, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, he set up a meeting. I mean, it was really Mark's project to give flight to. Mark's got a ongoing relationship with the RSC and said, look, if I could line this up, how would you feel about it? And the RSC were obviously quite keen. But the RSC does, classical theatre in the main, and it does do new stuff too, but normally with some kind of handle on history or previously existing storytelling or whatever. I did Don Quixote here, which was a new production, but obviously based on a 400-year-old book. And what was Seven Acts of Mercy was, based on the art and love life of Caravaggio.
Yeah.
So again, a new play, but classical themes. Whereas the Christmas show at the RSC doesn't always have to be that. It is meant to be a kind of slightly broader piece of entertainment. As a result of which, competition to land the Christmas show at the RSC is pretty high, because they'll put on whatever it is, a dozen productions here a year, but only one of them's the Christmas show. Time. So it was always geared up to be a Christmas show here. And I think I did. They'd been working on it for a year when Robbie and Guy got involved. Robbie and Guy then handed in the songs. The RSC then were like, well, we need to just hear all of this spoken and sung to get a sense of whether it's any good. So 2 years ago, I did the workshops for it. And in the first week, was stood round a piano with a group of brilliant actors singing these songs, thinking, oh, no. Oh, they've really sold themselves a duffer here. Really? This is going to be terrible. I mean, no, the script's good and the story's good, but the songs are thin. And they just... You can see what they were going for, but they have missed this by a country mile. And then in the second week, the band turned up. And what the band were playing was not what the piano was playing. And by the end of that second week, I was like, I have to be in this. I really have to be in this. There were songs that... And like I said, that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Songs that I learned that week for the following 18 months, I would still wake up and realise that the melody I was humming was one of the songs from this show.
So it's quite a long process to get to where you are now then, isn't it?
Well, yeah, although... the creative teams, they're the people really putting in all of that time. Yeah. I don't quite know how this happened, but I mean, I'm delighted that it has. I had done Don Quixote here, then we had to wait to see if that was going to transfer. Largely got told that it wasn't going to, and then my agent said, well, look, we've been really holding out for this, so just please bear in mind that my client... really was very keen to come back and work and do the work and do more work. And having waited and now being told no, I would just say, please bear that in mind when you're making future casting decisions. And a week later, they rang back and said, we're doing this workshop for Boy in the Dress. It's just 2 weeks, but, we agree that we would like to kind of keep something going and work together again in the future, so this would be something. And then... having done that show and thought how great it was, a couple of weeks after that, I got another phone call saying, oh, there's another producer, and they've just come to us and said they'd love to do Don Quixote. So I did the workshops for this. Then we restaged Don Quixote in the West End. While I was doing that, Philip Breen, who was directing Provoked Wife, asked me if I wanted to do that in the Swan. And then while that was going on, I got the phone call saying, so we have looked at a couple of other people for the part you read in the workshops, but we've really come to the decision that we think prefer it to be you. So I've spent the last year on 3 totally unrelated projects working for the RSC. And as a white middle class man, that's about as all dreams coming true as you could imagine.
And how's that been, juggling those 3 different roles, though? Because
a joy, because fundamentally, working for the RSC, personally, I can't speak for every actor going. Yeah. I believe this is true of most actors I've worked with here, but because we live in a world where Twitter's a thing, you now can't ever make a simple statement without then giving all of the disclaimers, because you're just trying to avoid 300 people shouting at you, why would you say that? But by and large, I feel it is true that when you work here, the onus is on making the thing as good as it can be, more than it is how many bums on seats, or how commercial can we make it, or what are the optics going to be like.
The work is the thing.
The work is the thing, and the quality is the thing. And my obsession really is trying to live qualitatively in a quantitative word. Trying to live qualitatively in a quantitative world. Everything has to be measured now. So, how happy we are as a nation is no longer defined by whether or not we have, an NHS with very low waiting lists and schools that we can get our kids in that are well supported, and community hubs where the community actually feels engaged and welcomed and part of something, which you would think would be the obvious things. Now you fill in a questionnaire, 1 to 10, a set of numbers are produced, and then they go, right, so that's the score, and now next year we have to get that score up. It's just about measuring things. And what do we know about monkeys? That they're pretty terrible at, length, fine. Width, something where you can actually hold out a measure of fine. But the more esoteric things that actually define who we are as people, we are evolved primates. Everything we are is between on and off. Everything is grey. But we live in a world run by computers, and all computers have are ones and zeros. Black, white, one thing, the other. And so, because of living in the information age, this is my theory anyway, who you are and what you're about and what's going to drive you increasingly is given to you algorithmically by a computing machine. But what you actually are and what you're really about is all in the gaps of what that thing could ever understand. And look, AI and machine learning and all of those things, but it's fundamentally skewed in favour of one thing or another. So I mean, look, this all gets quite flappy, because explaining it to me is quite easy, except that you end up sounding like a mad person. So I just, very slowly, it just seems like, philosophically, something that only exists on and off is going to be very hard pressed to understand something that only really understands everything in between there. Is really what it boils down to. How have I got onto this? I'm sure there was a point a while ago.
Well, I can't just pick up on the sort of measuring, the metrics, because creatively, you can't really measure creativity. You can't measure what's funny, what isn't funny. It's all subjective. And yet these days, people say, well, if you haven't got so many views on YouTube or so many subscribers, so many Instagram followers, then you might not get the opportunities that you might have done back in the day. So even that creativity is being measured on a sort of scale of success that isn't really measurable.
Well, but even going back pre-YouTube or pre-clicks or pre-counters, even the Oliviers or the Oscars, it's which was the best film. Well, I mean, that's not a thing. There's not a recipe under which we go, oh no, that film was the best film. I would watch Elf every day for the next year, and I would watch The English Patient never.
Oh God, The English Patient is
such a terrible film.
Yeah, it's one of the worst films,
and yet won the Oscar for Best Picture.
It won a lot of Oscars.
90, yeah. And yet, so one is best, and one is, what, a silly kids movie. But with my hand on my heart, I would never be able to accept any kind of argument that English Patient is a better movie, and yet it's got a prize that says it was the best. Absolute madness. So I think there's always a human instinct to want to be able to prove that something we think is objectively true.
Yeah.
And the problem with consciousness, largely, but really most things that exist because everything is filtered through our consciousness.
Yeah.
You know, the broader issue, again, this all just sounds very waffly. In my head, this makes perfect sense. But we have a natural instinct to want to be able to know stuff. Absolutely. That this thing is hot. If I do this, fire happens. If I do this, safety occurs. If I do this, I am fed. If I do this, this person will love me. These are the facts. Great, I know that, and I can move on. But what we actually know from life is you could do the same thing 5 times and you think you're doing it exactly the same, and actually the result is vastly different every time. And because the world is so fast and so busy, because we live in a way that is not what we are evolved to be, we don't live in the way that we are evolved to live, we all have this underlying sense of, hang on a second, something isn't right, am I going mad?
Yeah.
Which increases the desperation for knowing things that we can actually hold on to and say, right, well, look, I know that for a fact, so as long as I start from that position, I can't be going completely bonkers. And then somebody starts chipping away at that, and now we all just feel like we're in free fall. And where are those handholds? Where are those things that we can actually know as being true? And without having anything to hold on to, with that panic, what springs up? Fear. So now we're all making decisions based largely more on fear than anything else, which is the worst place to make any kind of decision from, because our evolved consciousness, when it encounters fear, encourages you to just shit yourself. What was that noise in those bushes? I need to get out of here. I need to make myself as light as possible and absolutely run for it. Quick, shit and piss and run all at once. Now, if that
fight or
part
flight
of our
or shit,
fight or flight and shite.
Yeah.
But if our being is in that kind of state most of the time, you know, like even the notifications on your phone are little red circles or little red spots. I have a really primitive place that sit within us of like, what's eight? So even staring at, you could get your phone out of your pocket to get a video message from your child telling you that they love you, but the point you get your phone out of your pocket, there's 3 different other reds, and you think, well, I better just check all of these. What if something has happened?
Yeah.
So even the instinct to check in with somebody tiny and frail that you love now comes with just a little extra source of, what if though?
Little sprinkling of anxiety.
Sprinkling of anxiety all the time.
Listening to you now describe all that, which I infinitely agree with all of it, makes me wonder, how the fuck do we get anything done?
Right. Yeah.
Because we just got this base level of anxiety running under every decision that we make.
Yeah.
How are we getting stuff done?
No, and it's worse than that, because if you do, I mean, I follow you on Twitter. I don't follow you on Twitter, I apologise, but
I wouldn't recommend it.
I'll fix it. Somebody smarter than I am can Google this, or if you want to leap in with a clever edit now in your podcast and
no, we don't
point out where it's from. But there was a psychologist that basically said, having done a study in terms of, again, more waffle, there was a study done where the psychiatrist said, if you were trying to generate psychopathy amongst a group of people, the way to do it would be to restrict the amount that they could say, make the saying of it totally anonymous, and provide within it as little as possible room for interpretation.
Right.
As in, the person writing the thing... hang on. I'm going to start this one more time.
I'm just going to Google psychopathy.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean?
Can you spell it?
Yeah. Well, psychopathy is being a psychopath.
Yeah. Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
But basically, if you were trying to encourage people to be as psychopathic as possible, you would make the way that they communicated anonymous and restrictive, and have the way that they deliver that message open to interpretation in more or less the worst ways. Mm-hmm. And I think this study came out in like 1990 something. And if you look at what Twitter is, it is exactly that. It is point by point how you would go about generating psychopathic feelings within people.
Yeah.
And yet now we encourage that type of conversation all the time. You know, WhatsApp is not quite the same because it tends to be amongst groups of friends who do know each other, and so if they read something and go, oh, that's just them making a joke, rather than, how dare you say that about gay people? Whoa, that was not, on every, if you use that word, but no, I meant it in a completely different context. No, you didn't. Yes, it's all of those things. So how do we get anything done? But not only how do we get anything done, how do we restore humanity to online communication?
Oh, well, I'm starting to think that maybe we can't. Well, we are festering a generation of psychopaths.
Yes.
Oh, my God, this pod has honestly made me rethink my entire life within 20 minutes.
Well, I wish that I was building to. So here's what we do.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you're talking to a man who is just absolutely insane. I spend all of my time just feeling like I'm going mad. And in part, I suppose that's smart-arsery of the worst kind, right? Because when you're a stand-up comedian, you both start with a certain psychology and then grow that psychology. So if you ever listen to any podcasts where comedians exclusively are interviewed, or watch comedians in cars getting coffee, comedians talking to comedians refer to themselves in the same way that wizards in Harry Potter refer to themselves. Like, well, we know, but, we've really got to keep this from the muggles. Now, there is something broadly true about all artists, and then some things that are specifically true about comedians, but we're on the outside. There's the flock in the middle, and stand-ups tend to be the wolf on the hill looking down. Now, ideally, you're a wolf more akin to a sheepdog than a wolf, because you want to look at what's going on for everyone and know that you've experienced some of it, but be able to have that step back where you can look at what everyone's doing and go, have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
Or why is it that? Or why do we all... But you're really reporting on the collective from the outside. Mm-hmm. So now that I don't do stand-up and haven't done stand-up for a long time, I still have that kind of mindset. But
an observer.
An observer, which I think actually makes great actors. Great actors observe what other people are doing and think, oh, God, what must be true for those people? And then when they're required to play a character, maybe for whom that experience is similar, they can draw upon what they observed as being true in someone else.
What was the aim for you when you were younger? Because you're obviously an all-rounder and you can do everything, and comedy came first, I guess. But what was this the aim? Being at the RSC?
So I was raised on a healthy diet of The Muppet Show.
It's a good diet.
It's a good diet. It's a very good diet. When I was about 3, found The Muppet Show. My dad had bought one of the first VCRs. And so when it went out on TV, my dad would video it, and then I'd watch whatever.
We used to video The Muppet Show as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like to the point where some episodes now that I own on DVD get to a point where I'm like, right, now the Tetley advert. Yeah.
My favourite, I was really into Rocky as well when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And Sylvester Stallone was on one of the episodes of the Muppets. That was my favourite one.
Really?
Did a song with them, and it was horrendous.
I'm about to say, how was that?
but it was my favourite episode. Sylvester Stallone was on it.
My favourite episode is Rudolph Nureyev.
That's some really good guests.
Yeah, I mean, amazing calibre of people. My two favourites, weirdly, are Rudolph Nureyev, and I assume really all that happened was that was one that my dad videoed, and it may have been the first on the tape. So I've just watched it most, and in my head I think, oh, that's the best episode of the Muppets. But objectively, as an adult, and this is a bit, again, murky, but Richard Pryor was booked to be on the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
And it was the week he set himself on fire with his crack pipe. And he was, I think it was when he set himself on fire, he was meant to be on a plane within the next 6 hours, because they made the Muppet Show in London, I think at Pinewood, so all the big American stars would be flown over to do the show. And with not enough time, Henson gets the phone call like, he's not coming, he's in hospital.
He can't make it.
And so now, frantically, they've got to try and find someone who can do the show. And Jim Henson looks at one of the writers that they had on the show and says, "You're funny, you do it." And that was Chris Langham. And because the whole show is not the Muppets saying, we've got this big star guest, and thank God the big star guest is here, and now what are we going to do with this big star guest? The whole show is like, who are you? And he's like a delivery boy. Okay. And they're like, well, you'll have to go on. And what? I know. So his whole thing is actually that he's an even bigger Muppet than the Muppets. Normally, you've got a person there going, why are all you people mad? He's there with being told what to do by all these other guys. And it ends up with him in a wardrobe singing "I Love You, Hawaiian Cowboy," which is this really verbally dexterous bit of Hawaiian in amongst this kind of upbeat ukulele song.
Yeah, ukulele stuff, yeah.
And it's as mad a thing as you would ever see in your entire life.
Sounds very joyful.
He punches a hole in the back of it, or saws a hole out the back of the wardrobe so his face can get through, but he's locked in the wardrobe. And then at the end of it, genuinely, I would think probably about 200 kilograms of monkey nuts pour like a torrent onto the top of this wardrobe, and are sort of semi-drowning him as it fills up the wardrobe. It's incredible. And then
Has had a profound effect on you, this?
Well, I genuinely think it did, because for the whole of the rest of my life, having had the Muppet Show, what I now understand about myself, and it's a relatively recent revelation in the last few years, there's only 17 months between me and my brother. Now, I will look you in the eye and fight you to the death to tell you how loved I was as a child. Really. My mum, my dad, brilliant. My nan, amazing people, loving, kind, good people. So why would I have this incessant need to be approved of by strangers and to win their approval? To, like, hey, look at me do a thing. Why would that be the case? There's only 17 months between me and my brother. So at the point I was 9 months old, sort of just coming into, oh, hang on, there are other people here and shapes and things. My mum would have been pregnant with another baby, and I've now experienced 2 pregnancies that my wife has been through. And how distracting it is, and the biochemical requirement of growing a whole other human being within you is really full on.
Recently you've got a 9-week-old, haven't you?
11
Oh, wow. Yeah, right.
It's crazy.
So if you're a little tiny baby and you want your mum, and then as you get to sort of 18 months, your mum is like, give me a sec. Cry. Put you down, wait, just give me a moment. And then when you're like 18 months old, now this is other baby, and you're like, sorry, excuse me, can I just... No, you get to go, but just wait over there.
Because I've got me some more attention.
Yeah. And I think I get that really makes perfect sense to me. So, again, the tail end of that process of being 3-4 years old, which seems to be vaguely what psychiatrists say, is...
From RST stage or automation, can they contact sound on channel 1, please? That's anyone from RST automation.
This is great.
Contact sound on channel 1. Thank you.
For for a place called The Quiet Room, this is really quite something, isn't it? So it makes sense to me that at the point I was just sort of being a toddler, clearly with some desire to receive more attention than I was getting, the Muppets, which are this ragtag bunch of creatures who are all trying to show off, who are all trying to get the attention. You know, Gonzo's like, Kermit, I've got this great idea. And Fozzie's like, listen to this joke. Yeah. And Piggy's like, let's go on a date. I absolutely did just copy jokes and bits and skits and sketches that were from the Muppets and perform them for my nan, my mum and my dad.
Okay,
and had them go, oh, isn't that great? Isn't that funny? And then when friends of theirs would come around, they'd go and do your,
your
putting on my
show,
top hat, go and do that. And so for whatever reason, and I mean that in the great universe sense, the design for us all, for whatever reason, I think I've just had it absolutely baked into my DNA that showing off in front of people where people then reward you by telling you did that well and they enjoyed it is just as woven into my DNA as breathing or eating or sleeping. And I feel awful about that. I think there's a real tragedy in that, because when we look at people like Gandhi or the Dalai Lama or the Buddha,
you're calling for that plague to come.
Yeah.
It's all happening today. This is great.
Such a quiet room. I can't believe it. We tend to think of people who are they have reached a sense of inner contentment, and from that place, rather than there being a kind of frantic reaching out all the time, trying to grab at things, there is instead a stillness and a calm and merely an offering of oneself.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the kind of ideal way of being. But what I am literally hardwired to be is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
And I feel that there's a certain tragedy, that there's a certain abuse. How dare I have been made in this way? And then you follow that step on, okay, by who? Well, now I either require a god, or I need to think that my parents knew exactly what they were doing and did it anyway for them to carry any part of the blame. And now that I'm a parent, I know that isn't how that works. You are just people trying to make this child not die and be as happy and healthy and productive as possible, so that when they're an adult, they're not a complete arsehole. So, then you get back to Larkin. They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They have their insecurities and make up new ones just for you. We are all just here, not as a result of a calm walk towards, some perceived line that says, well done, you're a success. We pinball, we just ricochet off the events and the other people in our life, and hopefully where you pinball out to is somewhere decent, useful, productive, kind.
Yeah.
But it's not by design. You can have a vague design. In the same way like a shepherd has a design, like how do I get these sheep into that pen? That's the design. But how he's going to go about getting them into that pen
they could be all over
with this
the place.
dog whipping wildly left and right and barking and then being still. And as true as that is of parenting, that is also true of the self-care that I think we're meant to give each other. And so the final stage of that process is, at what point is your own happiness about accepting that you are like what you are like?
Exactly. But it sounds like you knew that quite early.
No.
Good. What
so
Jim?
you've been fighting against that a little bit, have you? Do you think then?
No, there's no fight to be had. Like
the fight's over. Like
Like I don't feel I've ever been more or less productive as a human being as a result of any efforts I have ever made. I feel like I just get to a point and go, right, so where from here? Well, if I do this, okay, well, what's that going to require? So I think I'm lucky enough in that I'm smart enough that at each of those points I can get a pretty good sense of what is required to not fail at this thing. And mastery is not knowing how to not fail at something. Mastery is knowing how to succeed at something. But that would be people who had self-control and a plan and not an incessant need to win the approval of strangers. Whereas mine is just a lot more like, right, okay, if I do this, I can get to there, and then what I'll do when I'm there, I'll worry about when I'm there. You know, it really comes from a profound sense that this is chaos. So making long-term plans is pointless, and all you can really do is kind of get moment to moment.
It's almost an absurdist approach, isn't it?
Yes, I do feel profoundly absurd. That's you are hitting the nail on the head, because and that's why then you end up feeling mad because other people are clinging on, like people of my generation talking about what they're going to do when they retire.
We were talking about this the other day, weren't we? There was an advert for pensions on TV, and I was like, what's a pension?
Yeah.
Pension?
What is that?
Amongst our generation and the generations behind us, the cost of living is so sky high, and the odds of there being any kind of state pension that will pay for
anything
at all,
literally,
let alone rent, let alone food, I mean, just anything, is so tiny that the idea of just hearing people make those plans strikes me as like moronic. Whereas my approach to that is, so let's go to the pub. So let's go out.
Yeah.
Let's stay up late and tell stories and play games and see if we can set your shoes on fire and then carry this person round the town square.
I just bought my shoes, so
singing a song backwards, because it'll be a laugh.
Yeah.
Because in doing that is as close as we can get to telling our inevitable murderer to fuck off. Death is coming. Death will kill us all. But for as long as we are joyfully reveling in the absurdity of it, fuck you, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, I do subscribe to the absurdist kind of theory a bit. I do think this is chaos that we're living in, and the best of you can make of it is great. And actually, listening to you describe it there makes me almost feel like maybe it's actually these other people that have got this like pension and retirement plan. Maybe they're the absurd ones in a way, almost to try and tie themselves down and have this rigid formula.
I mean, congratulations, you are literally 2 thoughts away from going full Joker.
Yes! That's the plan. Yeah. Good, my agent will be delighted. That's great news.
Yeah. Look, in a world gone mad, who is mad?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and
you say you've only come to this realisation recently, though. What was there something that...
No, the realisation is that clearly the realisation was just feeling increasingly how untethered I am from what people seem to be worried about and think about and are concerned about and scream about and shout about. I find it very troubling, and it also informs a way of being amongst the people I'm closest to that doesn't bring about an enormous amount of happiness.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have 2 children, 8 and 12, and I've been married for nearly 13 years, about 12 and a half years. And I'm away from them all the time because I have no skills. I have no, qualifications. If I don't do some variety of showing off for a living, I could work in retail. I could probably just about pull off being assistant manager of a pub. That is as much. I like
the way you went assistant but not manager. Assistant but not manager.
No, I don't have the skills to manage a pub. I could learn them if I spent long enough. I think as an assistant manager, I think I could learn the skills to manage it. But I wouldn't have them currently. So all I'm saying is to actually stop doing this type of work for a living. Those are my options. I think assistant manager, just because of how old I am, you can't really work in retail or in pubs at that low level past a certain age without people thinking, it's all gone terribly wrong.
Bless him.
So I'd have to be looking at it longer term. Like, it's got to build from here. So I think I'd need assistant manager. And I've worked in enough pubs that I've like, I know enough about it, so I can do it. Yeah. That's not me like self-aggrandizing. That's not me saying if you're listening to this and you are just, in inverted commas, just bar staff, that, that's no good. I just mean that I've worked in enough pubs that I think I should be able to pull off assistant manager.
Well, that is the truth.
Yes, hopefully. But, and so because showing off happens when other people aren't at work, it means that my work is when no one else is working or at school. So I will always be away when everyone else is around. So when you invite me to your birthday party, I'm not coming.
Yeah.
And when you invite me to your, wedding anniversary, bar mitzvah, engagement party, gender reveal, whatever it is, I'm not going to be there because I'm going to be at work. Not winning the affection and love and meaningful moments within the relationship of people I love and respect, but instead just away trying to win the approval of strangers. And that's mad, right? I mean,
do you feel that though? Sometimes, do you feel that?
I feel that all the time.
Yeah.
I have 2 children that I never see that I love more than anything on earth, because now my responsibility to make sure that they don't starve and have somewhere warm to eat means that I have to continue down the path that I started when I didn't have those concerns.
Yeah.
Now there is a lie in that. There's an honourable lie in that. And the honourable lie that I have set up is that. And now, of course, I have to do it for my children. And that's a lie. Because needing to do this is as woven into who I am as breathing and eating and sleeping. So then that's like profoundly selfish, right? I have a wife and children, but the sacrifice that I'm making for them is what? Just that I give them all the money that I earn doing this. But I'm not motivated by money. I don't care about money at all. So I'm both able to filter the money back, which is my responsibility, and go, look what I did, aren't I great? Whilst that money and that mechanism meaning almost nothing to me. That's fucked up.
I get from listening from you talking about the Muppets and all that through to this moment, I feel like you don't really have a choice.
No.
That's
totally how I feel. Because to not be who I am makes me so depressed that I want to kill myself. But to be who I am is so flawed in actually being the type of person that I would put value in if I met, that how could you ever be satisfied with being that?
But going back to the absurdist theory.
Which, by the way, that proposition of if you're this thing, you want to kill yourself, and if you're that thing, you know it's valueless, only leaves you with absurdity.
Agreed. But also, everyone is flawed, and everything is flawed in a way. So actually, that doesn't matter as much.
Right, because it's on or off. It's a 1 or a 0.
Yeah.
It's the worst or it's perfect. And then when you say, but this is so far from perfect, it's the grey area in the middle, you think, well, I've fucked it then, haven't I? Because it's not perfect.
Nothing's perfect.
Because nothing's perfect, because we're not machines.
Exactly.
We're not 1s and 0s, ons and offs. We are all the grey area in the middle.
And we have to cut ourselves some slack. Going back to what we were saying earlier, we have to give ourselves the wins.
Is the idea, but what we're actually doing as a society is we're generating cancel culture.
Yeah, completely.
You used the N-word in a joke in 2007. Cancelled. Right, well, okay. I mean, I was 26, and at the time, culturally, it was a different... for what it's worth, I don't recall using that word ever in a joke. I'm using this as a theoretical example before anybody gets terribly upset.
But, through your tweets.
But, I've definitely, as even a cursory Google of my name will tell you, I've said some fucked up things. I've said some terrible things on Twitter. And can I justify those? Can I give you the reasons for saying them? Can I explain that, it was in my head a funnier thing to say, or the tone of voice was funnier, or it was a reference to something else? Yeah. Do you care? No. I've realised the thing largely about Twitter and those Twitter storms is it always starts from, do I like the person who said it?
Yeah.
And what follows is just people going, I've never liked you, and now I've got this.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare that somebody comes out with something where they're like, oh, I love you, and I really get what you're on about, but you've said this now, so I can't like you anymore. It's just not how we work as people. Like the Danny Baker thing I found really interesting. He's got a long history of kind of using hokey, like Barnum-style images to give it kind of old-fashioned razzmatazz show business and use that to skewer things. And I genuinely think that if you're a white man not familiar with all of the racist tropes that get thrown at black people, or even if you are familiar, they're just not at the forefront of your mind. You're not using it as a filter, that you could, in what seems like quite a funny thing, in likening a new member of the royal family to what was, I think of like a sideshow chimp, is quite funny in that it's totally against the status. Where you then haven't applied the filter of, and that's also a racist trope, and this new royal represents somebody with a different lineage, than the kind of inbreeding of what European royalty has been for the last 400 years or whatever. Like, oh shit, I definitely shouldn't do that. But you're just thinking it was like, it's a continuation of my hokey sideshow, mockery. And then you just handle it badly because you don't apologise, because you feel attacked. And people are going, oi, mate, that's really racist. Well, when people attack you, what do? You go, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
And then you're suddenly in a slanging match, and all the people who ever thought you were shit go, oh, great, sleeves rolled up, let's pile in.
Yeah.
And then when it's things like racism or, various gender-based phobias or lifestyle or sexuality-based phobias or whatever, then people feel like there's a righteousness to that, and that you're doing God's work on some level. Whereas, and look, yes, white, middle-aged, cisgendered male, I realise who I am, I know what I am saying, and I'm sorry that it has less validity as a result of my privilege than it might do if I were someone else in a different body with a different setup. But until we can see people do and say stuff that we don't like and can still respond kindly, we're just going to tear each other apart. And it's not that I'm saying that what people are saying is, no, it's okay, really. So you should be less cross or less angry about that. I'm not excusing, when people say truly horrendous, racist, homophobic, misogynist shit.
Yeah.
But all the time that we're just ready to roll up our sleeves and tear strips of people, we're just making more enemies. And it sucks that we always have to be kinder. It sucks that we have to be more compassionate than the opposition, whoever your opposition may be. It sucks that is true. Heavily.
Yeah.
Well, we've had these debates for years. It's never going to change. Right, yeah. But unfortunately, part of our human experience now is that we just have to keep fucking having them. Two fucking morons.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to keep explaining this over and over again to people who have no interest in hearing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are never going to change.
Who are never going to change.
They don't give a fuck.
But for all the time we fight them, We are making more of them, and we are making them stronger.
Yeah.
Just how heavily that sucks. But there is no other choice.
Life's quite tiring, isn't it?
Oh, and if you were trying to do it en masse, then how do you do it?
Yeah.
So a few elections ago, in my borough, handed out leaflets for the Liberal Democrats and went to council estates and knocked on doors in the lead up to the election and was like, look, in this borough, the Labour candidate and the Tory candidate are both absolute bastards. This Lib Dem guy is a doctor who genuinely believes in fairness and all of those things. So in this borough, at this election, would you consider voting Liberal Democrat? No. Why? They want to take away our benefits. What? Where have you got that from? No, we all know that. Hang on.
We all know.
What? And it was on this particular estate, they were all Labour. Now, I'm a card-carrying member of the Labour Party. You think that's what I want? But specifically, the woman in that borough was part of the... Do you remember there was 2 Labour MPs who lived in neighbouring boroughs? And they were both claiming each other's second homes on...
Not really.
As on their expenses. So basically, the taxpayers buying them 2 houses. And then had totally crumbled at the 3rd runway in Heathrow, which is in that borough.
Jesus.
It was like, we can't elect people who are taking the piss out of us that much.
Yeah.
So I just thought, if I went door to door with these leaflets and laid this out as the facts, like, look, I can show you articles, I can show you this, that, and the other, that it would be enough to change people's minds. And you realise that facts don't matter to people, it's how they feel.
Yeah.
And it was shortly after that I became an actor. Because you can't change people's opinions with facts and polemic, sadly.
Yeah.
If you could... Living in the information age would be a glorious time for popular enlightenment.
Yeah.
We have literally the sum total of all human knowledge in our pockets at all times.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why are we more lost than we've ever been?
Yeah.
And it's because we make decisions based on how we feel more than what we think. Yeah. Now, what we think may have some impact on what we feel, but you have to change how people feel in the first instance for them to want to think about it. And it turns out the only way currently we know how to do that is stories.
Yeah.
If I can tell you a story, like the reason Daniel Blake was as important a film as it was is people who didn't necessarily have that mindset watched it and it moved them so much they were like, oh, I see what's going on here.
Yeah.
Even like something, dopey and mainstream to a point, like Les Mis, a man from genuine poverty, christened a criminal just because he was trying to survive, who, through slightly shady enterprises, but ultimately brings himself to be at the forefront of society and uses some of that wealth and privilege to save the people who were exactly in the situation I am, is then tumbled by the police who say, no, we still are going to hold you accountable for your crimes. Never mind what you've done in your life. Set amongst the backdrop of a social revolution, because that's happening all the time.
Yeah.
Now, I think you can go and watch that play as somebody who works in HR for an international corporation and maybe be called upon to go, yeah, right, yeah, what...
Might question.
Well, you'd hope.
What is the notion of accountability? What are we hoping to achieve by some of these things? Or, or a prison officer or a magistrate, maybe, I don't know. But I think you can feel so moved by that tale that it makes you ask some questions about what you actually think. Whereas me just coming and telling you a bunch of stuff comes back down to that old line, it's far easier to lie to someone than it is to convince them they've been lied to. It's far easier to convince someone of a lie than convince them they've been lied to.
Is that some of that why you stopped doing comedy?
Yeah. I really thought that if you stood on stage and just laid it out in an entertaining way, people would agree with you. And they don't. That is just not how it works, it turns out. Which was a mystery to me, because so much of my thinking was shaped exactly by Bill Hicks.
Exactly. I was going to say Bill
Stuart Lee and George Carlin.
Yeah.
And equally, Chris Morris and Armando Iannucci and Steve Coogan, and then, absurdly, Vic and Bob.
Yeah.
So at the point there were two things that made me stop doing stand-up. One was that I got the opportunities to do other stuff, and I was excited to do that other stuff. One was the experience of going door to door and realising, oh, I see, just shouting at people isn't going to work. And the third was realising I was just shouting at people. And I'd got to the point of really, really feeling like I was way more interested in laying out why this was all going wrong than I was in making people laugh. Now, comedy can be a million things. There is no one thing that is comedy. But I think to call yourself a comedian, you have to have at your core the desire to make people laugh. Yeah. It has to come from that. That doesn't mean it can't be clever or sharp or have long periods of silence, but I just think it has to come down to, I'm going to go into a room and I'm going to make everyone in that room laugh. And where I realised I just wasn't bothered about that anymore, I thought, I think I need to stop doing this. And there were enough other opportunities being offered to me and that I was very excited about, that I thought, I think I'll pursue those and just see where that goes. And I would now tell you the story of the last time that I ever did stand-up, because it was sort of weirdly totemic. I booked my last ever stand-up gig at the Comedy Store because when I started doing stand-up, as good as you ever hoped your life would be playing the Comedy Store. Baddiel and Newman had played Wembley, but nobody had really followed that up, you know. Izzard was playing theatres and doing his own tour. There were 5 or 6 comedians doing that kind of thing. But if you were just going to be a stand-up, if you were a regular at the store, my God, that was the gold stamp, the gold standard rather, the rubber stamp or the gold standard to unmix that metaphor. So I was fortunate enough that I got to play the Comedy Store a number of times, and the man who runs it, Dom Ward, was enough of a fan and a supporter that I said to him, I'm going to do my last gig. And he was like, well, I was going to book you that weekend. Have you got anything after that? And I was like, no. He's like, well, then, looks like your last one's at the store, which was lovely. So I finished my last bit, and I put the mic in the stand, and the distance from being on stage in front of the microphone at the Comedy Store to backstage is literally about 20 steps, not even. And I ping the mic back in the stand, and I have this like weird moment of zen where I'm like, well, there we are, old son. You did it. I remember the conversation I had with myself at 20 thinking, well, you want to do stand-up. Why aren't you? Because it's scary. Okay, but what's more scary? Starting it now or dying, and in the moment you die, look back going, what, you never tried? Yeah. And that was so much more terrifying than starting doing stand-up that I started doing stand-up. And in this moment of zen, I remember everything from that realisation to booking the gigs, to getting the gigs, to being in like a comedy competition and getting through to the final of that, and then absolutely shagging the final, just going so terribly wrong, feeling so depressed about it, and how awful it was. And then a mate of mine offering me a regular MCing residency, which then really turned into a club that we loved doing, and then being a professional, and then travelling all over the country. And then I remember phoning my dad in an airport saying, you only ever gave me 2 bits of advice. They were, do a job you love and do a job that allows you to travel. And I'm phoning you from the airport where I'm about to fly to Dubai to tell jokes to strangers. Like all of these like snapshots flashing through my mind as I take these 20 steps, and I get in to the dressing room and Eddie Izzard is sat there. Now Eddie Izzard was like my hero from 13, 14 maybe to 16, 17. I just thought he was the greatest human being alive. And those like first 4 stand-up specials he did, I had them on VHS, and then they all got reissued on DVD, and I bought them all again on DVD, and he'd had books out and all of those things, to the point where I kind of adopted a slight drawl, the singe dans la. And when I started doing stand-up, everyone was like, it's a bit Eddie Izzard-y, isn't it? Like,
is it that obvious?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, when you watch new stand-ups now, you go Stuart Lee, Michael McIntyre, Stuart. And so there he is. And I don't know him. I've met him a couple of times, but not in a way that anybody would ever remember, you know. And he wasn't there when I walked out on stage, so it's like he's been teleported there or whatever. And he's talking to somebody else in the corner, and then he turns around and he's like, oh, hi, Eddie. And I'm like, oh, yeah, Rufus. Look, man, this is going to sound really weird, but, like, it's so weird that you're here. Because to no small amount, you're the reason I started doing stand-up. And tonight is the last night that I do stand-up. From this point on, I'm not a stand-up anymore. And he went, can I just stop you there? You are a stand-up. You're never not a stand-up. You're just a stand-up who does other things. And so the time that I wasn't a stand-up was about 15 seconds where literally my comedy idol teleported into this room in order to tell me I couldn't be more wrong. And I understand now, weirdly, better what he meant than I understood at the time.
It's like a sort of weird field of dreams, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't book him, but he came anyway.
Yeah.
And it is about a mindset. It is about a way of thinking about the world. And just thinking about moments. I'm not sure, again, in terms of mental health, I'm really not sure it's very healthy, which is why, you know, Tears of the Clown and, you know, all comedians are secretly terribly depressed. But I think it's just you build the circuitry, the neuron pathways that make certain thoughts more available to you and more prevalent. And if you're doing that because it's like, oh, that's funny, the more of those you have, it's like, actually, some of those are really dark and really depressing, and it's very hard to find weird that a mental process that you build to generate comedy also will generate so much sadness, because you're just running code through a machine and seeing what spills out the other end. Well, it might be one joke, but it'll be one joke and 10 other things. You're like, oh, no, not that. Oh, no, not that. Oh, definitely not that. Jesus Christ, why would you think of that? What sort of monster are you? And, you know, it's a thing that people in all walks of life get hung up on, about dark thoughts, but it's not that. Your brain is an amazing machine for solving puzzles and looking for patterns. And more extreme ideas will ping more brightly, because it's like, maybe it could be this, maybe it could be this. So those more extreme ideas come out, because then it might be that there are two that come out and you go, oh, it's probably somewhere between those two. The extremity of those ideas are the markers, and what I need to actually do is somewhere in the middle of those two things. But what I think happens to a lot of people is that the fact they go, why would I have thought of that thing? Why would my brain give me that idea? Fucking hell, I am sick. I'm a terribly sick, awful human being. And no, it's not that. The reason it pinged so brightly in your brain is because your brain was going, right, so that's one extreme.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's how you feel. It's about how you apply how you feel about that idea that then does become a psychological problem.
Yeah.
Why would my brain tell me just to push this old woman in front of the tube on the platform? I can see the train, she stood there. I'm thinking to myself, God, she looks vulnerable. And then the next thought in my head is, push her. Go on, push her. See what happens. Now, it's the fact that you don't push her that means you're not a psychopath.
Yeah.
And then it's the feeling of like, why would my brain do that? Why would I am not right in the head. No, it was just one of your ways in which your brain was stretching out to the extremes to go, where are the edges of this? And once you realise, oh, it was just a thought that passed through and I can just immediately let it go and it doesn't mean anything, then I think you begin to be able to be kinder to yourself than the alternative allows.
Yeah, that's like your brain going, well, that's your limit.
Yeah.
So let's dial it back a bit from there.
And
see how we're doing.
Your immediate sort of inner feeling of like, Jesus Christ, that would be monstrous if I did that.
Yeah.
Is actually who you are.
It's like, was it John Ronson, I think, on our first podcast, said if you're worrying about being a psychopath, then you're not a psychopath.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and he's done tests.
And he would know. He's done. Yeah, he knows about that.
Yeah, he's sort of, the greatest living expert on psychopathy, isn't he?
100%.
Yeah. Yes, so the long and the short of it is that this pinballing through life mixed with trying to find what the patterns are and how you subvert those patterns to bring about jokes, then realising, oh, I see, that's really not making me very happy.
Yeah.
If I go and do something else, then I won't have to run new code through that machine all the time. I can go do something else, and then you realise, oh no,
not that either.
It's the machine. It's already built, and now everything I do is going to run through that machine, and the same outcomes will, or the same spectrum of outcomes will always be available to me. The difference is the work that I do now is part of a gang, not solo, and it can be for and with people that I love and respect. And that really, when it all is said and done, is what I really come back to over and over again. Our real problem is that we do not live as we are meant to live. We have evolved a really specific set of emotions, neurological pathways over hundreds of thousands of years that are all about living tribally. Everything we are, everything we're about, everything that we are capable of doing is about living tribally. You've got an 11-week-old baby. How is that your first baby?
Yeah.
Right. So you're still in the real loved-up honeymoon phase, right? It's just perfect.
Yeah.
And tiring.
Oh, yeah.
And all of those things. But, I mean, my God, couldn't be more perfect.
Yeah.
So 6 months from now, you will be lying in bed going, shut the fuck up. Why will somebody not make this tiny person shut the fuck up? And it doesn't mean you love them any less, and it doesn't mean you wouldn't die for them in a heartbeat. But you will just get to a point where the incessantness of what that is for two of you to raise this small baby, you can't help it, is grinding.
Also, you've just given me permission to say that now, because I'll be like, well, if my wife complains, well, Rufus Hound said I can say shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
so.
But you have to bear in mind, she's also...
Not to her.
Be careful. Just be careful who you're saying shut the fuck up to.
And
in general.
And she will be saying the same as well. So, you know, it's even Stevens.
Yeah.
But there are two of you. And now your job is to look after that tiny little person all the time. Well, what if your parents or your missus' parents moved in? Well, that's going to be quite helpful, right?
Yeah,
Reasonably. But like, moving in is a bit too close. So, you know, if they moved next door but one, that'd be pretty handy, wouldn't it? But then they're kind of old. So they can do stuff, but they don't want to be doing stuff all the time, you know. Too much. So what if instead, like a bunch of you that all had kids of roughly the same age, you were like, okay, I know you, I like you, you look after my kid for like a couple of hours now, I'll go off to the shops, I'll come back, I'll do that. Oh, lovely. And now that all seems to be easy. And now, because we're all working on this together, look, if I go to the shops, why don't I get your tea bags as well? Well, do you know something easier than that? Why don't I just to take care of all the shopping, you can do some of the kid stuff, and then we switch, and then we do that, and then we do that. And that is naturally the pattern that once you've got kids of school age, you kind of fall into anyway. Mm-hmm. Can you pick up my kids? I've got to go and do this, and I'll take you. We naturally do that. And women are unsurprisingly better at doing it more often than men. And maybe that's because of gender role reinforcement rather than natural instinct, but I'm no expert, I don't know. It does seem to me from talking kindly to women about this that it's not something that consciously that they are doing, and it feels instinctive to many of them, and I would listen to women and their experience rather than inflicting my own on them. That seems to be what the gist is. It's like, oh yeah, you know, it's fine. So if we actually lived like that in tribes of 120-ish, 120 to 150, which primatologists will tell you when they examine our primate brains is roughly the size of tribe that primates of that brain size should be living in. Interestingly, when you look at the number of people folks interact with on Facebook, tends to be about 150. We are capable of ascribing personhood to about 150 people in our lives. Your bin man, you know, is a person, and you might see them occasionally, or refuse disposal personnel. you know they're a person, but they're not really a person. They are somebody who does a thing. Their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, what they wish for themselves and the people in their world, no idea. Your child's teacher at school. Oh, they're great. Oh, we've met them loads of times. They're lovely. If they got sick, would you run around there with chicken soup? Would you, some people have enormous amounts of compassion and can do all of that. But there's a limit, it seems, to about 150 for most people. And after that, everybody's just, that thing person. My postman is the male thing person. My kids' teachers are the kid teaching person and whatever. But they're not people. They're not Jane or good old Bob. They're that. And it turns out that we're incapable of that. Our brains literally can't make people be people. Why is it when we hear that there was some earthquake the other side of the world that killed millions, our response is, oh shit, that's terrible. Do you want a cup of tea? It's not that. Arguably, that makes us monsters. That there would be 4 million people, or do you know? I've just watched Watchmen, and there's 3 million people who die in Watchmen, and so that number's coming up. And I have basically conflated a fictional disaster with the type of disasters that really do happen in the world. So I should probably stop that. But horrific things happen all over the world, and we can understand the horror of them, but they don't really touch us or affect us. So arguably why comic relief has been as successful as it has, because it fundamentally does understand that you need to humanise it. You need to show like one person's story and make it true of one person, and then we can empathetically look at that situation and think, God, what an awful thing it must be to go through that. And it opens the door on our empathy to even momentarily think of that person as a person. And then we feel like, Christ, we must help them. Very good. Whereas just broad strokes of, we can hear that there are an extra 40,000 children in this country since Conservatives took office living under the poverty line. And we just go, oh, God, that's awful. We should really change that and do something about it. And we can feel really deeply passionately about that. But it's broad. Whereas if 5 kids, you see it all the time with teachers looking at 5 kids getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and then when they talk to them, it turns out that they're not eating at home. It's those teachers who, the ones on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram crying, going, there are children in our cities dying of malnutrition. Why aren't we changing this? You have to have that contact for these things to really hit you and hurt you and inspire you to make the changes. So this thing of living tribally and amongst one another is really, really human. And human is touch and sense and smell and tone of voice and look and body position. Was it between 70 and 85% of the ways we communicate with one another are non-verbal? That thing of it's not what you say, it's how you say it is totally true of the whole human experience. And we now do everything virtually. We have taken away so much amongst the people we claim to love. We have removed the actual physical being in one another's space, which is what we are evolved to understand gives us meaning and place and community and belonging. And touch. I go on about this all the time, and it's such a depressing thing to talk about. But do you know the Romanian orphan mortality story? No. Huge numbers of Romanian orphans under Ceausescu. Some American volunteers go to one of these enormous orphanages where the infant mortality rate is sky high. And they are going to do a study to work out why some babies survive and many don't. And they're all getting the same amount of food, they're getting, the same kind of general level of care, but yet some survive and some don't. And then they realise that the ones that survive are all the ones in cots on corridors. Because the nurses, as they go past and these babies are screaming, the nurse reaches in and gives them a tap or a pat or squeezes them a hand or whatever. And so further study is done, and it turns out that being touched is so fundamentally important to us that if we don't have it, we die.
Wow.
It is literally being of feeling that you belong. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, look at primates all the time, huddled together, touching each other, grooming each other. Yeah. You belong, you're wanted, you're nurtured, you're here, you're part of it. It's so fundamentally important to us that if we don't have it as babies, we die. Something in our brains goes, oh, this hasn't worked. Turn off.
That's insane.
Now think about, bullshit pervy men, awful shitbag men, and I will say men, because it just very, very rarely seems to go the other way around that it's enough that it's worth flagging up. Just arseholes using any excuse to press themselves up against people on crowded tubes or to be, makes you feel genuinely sick. So, of course, we now have rules about how we must touch each other. And when we listen to people with, who are, I'm trying to remember the term, but non-neuronormative or whatever I forget, but people with various, basically brains that run different software, saying how loud noises,
sensory sort of stuff,
sensory stuff. Like there was a thing recently about if you applaud at a theatre, you applaud at an event, it means people who maybe are somewhere on the autism spectrum or some other personal situation that that runs and governs how they feel about being in crowded spaces with loud noises, makes them very sad. We're excluding those people from society. And so why don't we just not do that? And then we could be kinder to those people. And that all makes perfect sense. But unfortunately, it just seems like for the vast majority of people, not the shitbag, douchebag men who are trying to screw people over and use it for cheap thrills and gratification of the worst kind, which is the worst of us, and not the kindest level of us either, where please don't touch me because it makes me feel very awkward and I don't like it. But for the vast majority of people in the middle, just holding hands, shaking, touching each other's shoulders, embracing, hugging, again, in not pervy, awful ways, really need to flag that up. Definitely not what I'm saying. But just in the way, if most people work in offices, you don't walk into the office every day and hug 20 people there. There might be 2 or 3 people that you do genuinely like that you will do that with. But, it's not a scaled thing.
Yeah.
And so we are societally designing out the things that make us feel like we belong from our day-to-day interactions. We don't communicate with the people we really love face-to-face. We do that through a screen. That screen then necessarily removes context and tone and all of those things, whilst at the same time not being touched and touching other people, which gives us that primitive sense of belonging, whilst then trying to live in a little box either on our own or with a very small number of people, which isn't what generates happiness and belonging and community either. And then we wonder why we all feel isolated and sad and that we must be doing something wrong because this is what normal people do. And normal people seem to be having a right old time of it. But why do I feel deep down that something is profoundly wrong? And then you talk to anybody for 10 minutes and they tell you they feel the same. So then what do? Right, it's time to be proactive. Dwelled too long just then on all of the negative things about it. What do? Proactive. You turn to the people you love and you explain all of this to them as I have just explained it to you. And you say, however sad, however messed up, however left out you feel in your life, we now have the solution. And the solution, my friends, is this. We are going to sell our houses. We are going to pool all the money. And we are going to live in a tribe of 120 people. And everybody who has just agreed with you about all of the other stuff looks at you and goes, fuck off. We're obviously not going to do that.
So 3 things from that. 1, I'm going to have a Facebook call tonight to get down to 150 people.
Hey, lovely.
2, can you please run as my local MP because I would 100% vote for you? And 3, can we end the podcast on a group hug?
Yes!
Come on, bring it in.
Oh, no, hang on. Have you got the mic there?
I have.
Okay, bring it into the middle of the group hug. So here's the thing. You're both taller than me, so I have to go lower.
Okay.
But one of the things that I am truly known for is making hugs last deliberately too long.
Okay.
Like an uncomfortably long amount of time. Because... my whole thing about people don't get touched and held and like squeezed, like our hands are all around each other's shoulders right now, but I've tucked my head into your neck. I am, I am baby birding you on some level. But this hug will now take too long.
Yeah.
Now you two know each other very well. I would imagine you've hugged a lot.
I'm fine with this.
But this is actually not very. Once you get past the initial like, hang on, this has gone on too long. Once you get into like, hang on, no, it's all right. It's just holding each other, isn't it? Yeah. I guarantee you, we could sleep like this. If we got propped up, it becomes very comfortable very quickly, and we don't do it enough.
No. And that's a different podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
Rufus Hound, thank you so much for being on the podcast. That was incredible.
Can I put a disclaimer just at the end of this podcast?
Yeah, of course.
Which I'm talking directly to the listener now. Your hosts know this already.
The listener, the one listener. I'm talking to you, listener.
Steve, you, the listener. I work nights, and I watched Watchmen last night, and then woke up. I didn't set an alarm because we'd arranged to meet at midday, so why would I need to set an alarm for midday? And then woke up at 20 to 1 in the afternoon. So many of these ideas that I have obviously just like vomited into this podcast are much, much better expressed elsewhere. None of these thoughts are original thoughts, and all of them are, as I say, the product of really smart people doing plenty of study. So I would just urge you, if there's anything in this that you agree or would like to find out more about, Google it and find actual doctors and thinkers and academics who explain this stuff much, much better than I do, please. What you have had is a brain only 2 hours awake, rambling. I'm so aware, just rambling and keeping going. But find out about this stuff, and I think until it's understood, it's very hard to live happily. Oh, and equally, if you do come across more studies that are able to bring about actual genuine personal fulfillment and happiness in a way that feels less contorted, let me know. Really quite up for understanding that. Thank you, listener.
Rufus Hound, that's been an incredible journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, Rufus Hound, what a legend.
Oh, amazing. It's just so great to spend that time with him, and so many just brilliant things in his brain about where we are at as humanity, as humans, really.
It's just, I love conversations like that go round and just, went to so many places.
Yeah, we touched so many different subjects and bases, didn't we?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And he was very open about, being away from his family while performing and, how that's difficult. And, it's a very open interview. So I appreciate Rufus being so sort of honest and open with us. It was great. Really nice. What a top man.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rufus.
Shall we read some tweets?
So I've got a tweet here from Matt Walton. I've been listening to the awesome Blank Pod this week. Have been recently introduced to it. A great outlet for Giles Perry Phillips and Jim Daly and their guests to talk openly about anything, including those times which feel a little more difficult to navigate. Fabulous.
Thanks, Matt. That's a really nice tweet. And I've got one from Gingy Faye Divine. That's a great name. It is. So I've been listening to Blank Pod by Giles Perry Phillips and Jim Daly, and it's pretty awesome. Very clever show and perfect for any Anglophiles out there. Oh, so she must be abroad. Plus, they have Dawn French on it. Legend. If you don't know her, your life isn't complete. Agreed.
Yeah.
Seriously, go look her up. So thanks, Ginge Faye Divine. Great name. It's a nice tweet to receive.
It's brilliant. And thank you for all your tweets and messages from us. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter or Instagram, you can at
@blankpod.
And you can also email us.
@blank. No, you can't. That's wrong. The blank podcast 2018 at gmail.com.
It's actually Blank Podcast 2018 at gmail.com.
Close.
But very close, Jim. Very good.
We should probably make that one as an email as well because we keep giving it out. But yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone.
We do. And, there's not much else to say, but have a great Christmas. And we'll...
Times two.
Times two.
Second time round.
Yeah. And we will see you in the new year with lots and lots of great new episodes.
Take care. Bye.